Hello, thank you for coming. I'm going to give it another minute or two to let people trickle in, and then we will get this presentation started. I'll give it just one more minute. Oh, can we go back to the beginning? There we go. Okay, so thank you all for coming to this public scoping meeting for the State Route 17 or SR 17 Corridor Congestion Relief Project. My name is Deanna Bolio with VTA Community Outreach, and I'll be helping to facilitate this the meeting this evening. Please note, just for the record, that this meeting is being recorded. So to start, I will introduce our project team, take you through our agenda for the evening, and provide some logistical details about how this virtual meeting and participating in it will work. So I'll start with introducing our team. We have Jean Gonzalo, VTA Capital Program Manager, Ann Kalman, VTA Environmental Program Manager, Chris Lilly, the VTA Project Manager, Wu-Jae Kim, Town Engineer for the Town of Los Gatos, and Brian Gassner and Julianne Smith from the Caltrans Office of Environmental Analysis. Thank you. So the meeting will begin with a presentation by staff about the proposed project and the environmental review process, and a question and answer session will follow. Your microphone will be muted throughout the presentation. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to type in any questions as we go. And these questions will be read aloud and answered at the end of the presentation. In general, we will answer questions in the order that they're received. The questions that are similar may be asked and answered together. The scoping meeting will last approximately 1 hour. And this presentation will be recorded and posted online for anybody who can't be here tonight or might want to review it. Please allow up to Monday morning to post the recording. So there are 2 ways to ask questions. There's using the Q&A feature or by raising your hand. And we strongly encourage people to use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. Some of you will likely have the same question and you'll be able to see that it's already been asked. And you can also ask a question verbally by clicking the raise your hand button. You will be called on. I will ask you to unmute or to accept the unmute, and you'll be able to ask your question. If you're using your phone to call into the meeting and not using the Zoom platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, and I will recap some of this information as we begin the Q&A. So with that, we'll get our presentation started. Here's Ann to talk about the purpose of this meeting and why we're here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this scoping meeting for the proposed State Route 17 Corridor Relief Project. I am going to cover the purpose of the scoping meeting and provide an overview of the environmental review process. I will be followed by Chris Lilly, who will describe the transportation challenges that Caltrans and VTA are focusing on in the project area. In other words, the need for the project. Chris will then describe the proposed conceptual project to address those transportation challenges, meaning the purpose of the project. Caltrans, in cooperation with VTA and the Town of Los Gatos, will prepare an environmental impact report, or EIR, for the project in accordance with the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. An environmental assessment, or EA, will also be prepared in accordance with the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. In this way, the project will be analyzed under both state and federal environmental laws and regulations in a joint EIR-EA document. The purpose of the scoping meeting, which occurs early in the environmental review process, is to provide information about the project and for Caltrans, VTA, and the town to receive feedback from other agencies and the public on the need for the project, the purpose of the project, potential design alternatives that address the purpose and need of the project, the environmental issues to be studied, and any foreseeable environmental effects of the project. Scoping helps us understand the issues of concern and the issues that may be of lesser concern. We acknowledge that people who live and or work in the project area may have unique knowledge of these issues. Therefore, your input during the scoping period is extremely valuable. Now I will turn it over to Chris, who will describe the existing conditions in the project area. He will also describe the purpose and need that addresses the existing conditions. And finally, he will describe the proposed project.
Thanks, Ann. The project is focused on the segment of State Route 17 from just south of Los Gatos-Saratoga Road interchange to the Lark Avenue interchange. Los Gatos-Saratoga Road is also known as State Route 9 on the west side of State Route 17. The entire project is located within the town of Los Gatos. A few of the site constraints that are present adjacent to the project location include Los Gatos Creek Trail, the Vasona Lake County Park, and Los Gatos High School. These constraints are factors that limit the scope of feasible improvements in the corridor. Areas just outside the Caltrans right-of-way and within the project area are typically developed residential properties, commercial properties, and parkland. Concepts that would have required substantial right-of-way acquisitions and numerous displacements were removed from further consideration. Caltrans VTA and the town of Los Gatos are interested in a design that limits the amount of tree removal and tree trimming required. The median will be paved with concrete barrier constructed to replace the existing metal beam guardrail. Utilizing the median will reduce the number of trees that would need to be removed. Growth in Santa Clara County and the relative lack of new housing in the communities closest to Silicon Valley will continue to increase travel demand on State Route 17. This is due to the disconnect between housing development and the growth of large Silicon Valley employment centers nearby. Another key need the town of Los Gatos and VTA has identified is the need to significantly improve the bicycle and pedestrian facilities along State Route 9. Improvements would be designed to encourage active transportation travel modes, meaning bicycle and pedestrian. Improved connectivity over State Route 17 and along Los Gatos-Saratoga Road is critical to the better accommodation of these active travel modes. The bicycle and pedestrian facilities are also of heightened importance in this portion of the town due to the active transportation trips for which the high school is a trip generator. Another major area that this project will look to improve is to reduce traffic congestion and improve traffic operations on State Route 17, which should in turn result in fewer cut-through trips. A cut-through trip is defined as a trip that does not originate or end in the town, but uses the town's local streets rather than the adjacent freeways. The project team has utilized big data sources such as Streetlight. The Streetlight software summarizes trip data from 40 billion location records obtained from smartphones and GPS navigation devices that are connected to cars and trucks. All personally identifiable information is removed from the trip data before a Streetlight makes the data available. That Streetlight information is used to identify travel patterns and inform the development of the build alternatives. This Streetlight data shows that approximately 6% of the weekday traffic with both an origin and destination outside the town of Los Gatos exits the freeway and utilizes local streets to avoid congestion that occurs along State Route 17 and State Route 85. This data also indicates that weekend beach traffic during the summer months can have 24% of the trips actually cut through the town to avoid this stretch of State Route 17 between Lark Avenue and Los Gatos-Saratoga Road. With that background information on the current situation, the purpose of this project is to A, improve mainline traffic operations and reduce congestion on State Route 17, B, reduce cut-through traffic in the town of Los Gatos, C, improve State Route 17, State Route 9 interchange operations, and D, improve active transportation, bicycle and pedestrian mobility and connectivity in the town of Los Gatos across State Route 17. Congestion and increased travel times along Los Gatos Road, University Avenue, Santa Cruz Avenue, and Winchester Boulevard were common occurrences before the COVID pandemic. Improving State Route 17 operations should reduce travel demand on those local streets. Smart residential and commercial growth in the project area includes the North 40 high-density mixed-use residential and commercial development. That planned development continues adjacent to Lark Avenue at the north end of the project. The additional trips associated with this development will be included in the travel demand model used for the project. Additional residential and commercial developments are planned for the area, and regional growth is anticipated to increase travel demand in the future. Now I'd like to talk about some of the project features that are in the scope of the planned improvements. The project improvements would propose to replace the existing full cloverleaf interchange at the State Route 9, State Route 17 with either a spread diamond or partial cloverleaf configuration. This exhibit shows a spread diamond configuration. The existing full cloverleaf is functionally obsolete. Full cloverleafs were used for facilities with relatively low traffic volumes that would not need to accommodate pedestrians or bicycles. The new interchange will require that the existing overcrossing be demolished and replaced with a wider structure that increases the vertical clearance underneath it. The existing overcrossing has non-standard vertical clearance. The wider structure will be designed to include wider sidewalks in both directions and Class 4 separated bike lanes in each direction too. These improvements, along with the elimination of the short weaving segments between successive loop-off and loop-on ramps, would make this location much more desirable for active transportation travel modes. The town has also initiated a project to construct a pedestrian bicycle overcrossing of State Route 17 at the Blossom Hill Road overcrossing. That is a separate and distinct project from these planned improvements. Auxiliary lanes are lanes that connect an on-ramp with the next off-ramp along a freeway. Auxiliary lanes would be added between the Los Gatos-Saratoga Road interchange and the Lark Avenue interchange to allow for 3 traffic lanes in both the northbound and southbound directions. The project would build out the State Route 17 median with paved shoulders and a new concrete median barrier. The amount of additional pavement on the outside of the existing travel lanes would be reduced by utilizing the median width as much as possible. This will help minimize the number of trees that would need to be removed. However, some tree removal will still be required. The amount of tree removal will be better defined as the project's preliminary engineering and design is better developed. Ramp metering is proposed at each of the State Route 17 on-ramps within the project limits. Meters are required per Caltrans adopted ramp meter development plan. Metering will assist the project's purpose in multiple ways. First, the meters will help optimize the volume of vehicles that can be accommodated along State Route 17. Second, the additional delay incurred by vehicles queued at the meters will further discourage cut-through or beach traffic. The existing changeable message signs within the corridor will be replaced and relocated to locations that don't conflict with the new auxiliary lanes. Sound walls that are impacted by widening will be reevaluated to determine if a taller or longer wall would be called for. The next slide shows one of the interchange alternatives, in this case, a spread diamond configuration with single on-ramps and off-ramps in each direction. Please note that this diagram also shows the town of Los Gatos Creek Trail Connection project. Those improvements are not part of this project and have already completed the required environmental review processes. The final design of those improvements is nearing completion and will be constructed separate from this project. The State Route 17 corridor congestion relief project will be designed to be compatible and to connect to those new trail improvements. My last slide shows the other interchange configuration that is under consideration. This interchange is a partial cloverleaf design. It has loop-on ramps in both the northbound and southbound directions of State Route 17. The result is that there would be 1 off-ramp and 2 on-ramps in each direction. Either interchange configuration would substantially be a substantial improvement over the existing condition when considering bicycle and pedestrian users of the facility. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Ann to discuss the environmental review process in more detail. Ann?
Thank you, Chris. The environmental review process for the project began with a notice of preparation of an environmental document. This notice was issued on May 6th, and it was distributed to various state, regional, and local agencies. The notice was also distributed in various ways to businesses, residents, and other interested stakeholders. The notice of preparation begins the 30-day scoping period, which ends on Monday, June 6th. Following scoping, we move to the technical analysis phase. The following list includes some, not all, of the topics addressed in this phase. Air quality and greenhouse gas emissions have become increasingly important topics. Biological resources, including sensitive habitats and special status species, are addressed. Visual covers project features such as tree removal. Noise looks at existing and future highway traffic noise. Transportation addresses traffic operations and multimodal access, and so on. The results of the technical analysis are summarized in the draft EIR-EA, and the details of the analysis are often included in separate reports that support the information in the draft document. Once the technical analysis is complete, a draft EIR-EA is prepared, and a notice of availability is issued in basically the same manner as the notice of preparation. The notice of availability begins the 45-day public review process for the draft environmental document. Within that 45-day review period, a public hearing is held to present the results of the environmental analysis. Comments on the draft document are accepted during the 45-day review period, including at the public hearing. All comments received during the 45-day review period are addressed in the final EIR-EA, and any changes to the draft document based on the comments are shown in the final document. Once all comments are addressed and edits are made to the draft document, the final EIR-EA is prepared and it is approved by Caltrans. As mentioned previously, the environmental review process begins with the notice of preparation, which begins the 30-day scoping period. The scoping period for this project ends on Monday, June 6th. After that, we anticipate that the technical, what am I doing here? Sorry, let me just get back to my script. I do have a script. After that, we anticipate that the technical analysis and preparation of the draft environmental document will take us to the summer 2023, at which time we will release the draft document for review and comment and hold a public hearing. Once we conclude that process, the environmental document is anticipated to, the final environmental document is anticipated to be available a few months later. The design of the project will continue over the following 2 years. Construction is anticipated to begin in 2026 and last until 2028. So how to submit scoping comments? Scoping comments may be sent by either email or postal mail so that Caltrans and VTA have a written record of the comments. Also, any comments you submit tonight, either verbally or in the chat, will also be recorded as part of scoping. We will return to the screen later on in the meeting to enable you the opportunity to write this information down. However, note that this information is also included in the materials that were sent out for this meeting and on the project webpage on VTA's website. As a final reminder, scoping comments are due no later than Monday, June 6th, to inform the environmental review process. And this concludes the environmental scoping and process overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And that concludes our presentation. So we will now begin to answer some of your questions. Again, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to type questions. I will read them aloud and staff will answer. And you can continue to type questions in the box as we go, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can through the duration of this meeting. If you're using your phone to call into the meeting and not using the Zoom platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. I will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. Example 1234, it's your turn to speak. I will unmute you. You can unmute your microphone and begin speaking after you accept the unmute. And to allow all those wishing to speak the opportunity to do so, we ask that you keep your verbal comments to approximately 1 minute. And we also ask that you treat the panelists here and your fellow community members with respect as is defined in our code of conduct. So let's get started. And I believe our first question might be better answered by our colleagues with the town of Los Gatos. And that is, when will all lights in Los Gatos be changed to smart traffic lights? It would do so much to help traffic flow.
Yes, Wujay Kim, the town engineer, and I could definitely answer that question. Separately from this project, the town again is a partner to this State Route 17 project, but separate from this project, the town is currently implementing a smart signals project along the Los Gatos Boulevard corridor. In addition to that, we're also improving the signals throughout the town so that we could better monitor back over at our traffic management center. But Los Gatos Boulevard corridor will have an adaptive signal system that the town and our traffic vendor will start monitoring once this goes live. And we expect this to be implemented or go live in the summer or fall timeframe of this year. It is an adaptive system that we're going to be implementing on Los Gatos Boulevard, but we're going to definitely have to monitor, and there'll be some staff involvement. And once this improvement moves forward, we'll definitely be coordinating with VTA and the highway improvements here. So hopefully that answered that question, and I'll return it back to the proctor here.
Thank you, Jay. So I've got 2 questions from Jennifer and then a hand from Ryan. So that's going to be the next order we go to. The first from Jennifer says, is there any possibility for coordination with the navigation apps to potentially remove or otherwise make less attractive the cut-through routes? I was going to say, Chris, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
That is a good question. And I'll be honest, I do not know the answer to that. Because obviously, those are independent companies, not associated with VTA or the town. Obviously, we have used some of those big data sources to try to, like I mentioned, Streetlight, to try to identify what the extent of that cut-through traffic problem is. But I do understand, I guess, the frustration when, and I won't name any of the individual navigation companies or applications, when they're directing people onto local streets to avoid the congestion, because it's obviously the opposite of what we are trying to accomplish with this project. But to be honest, to change their algorithms, I don't know what all would be involved with that, or potentially what would be required to make something like that happen.
Wujay, I see your hand. Did you want to take a stab at that too?
Yes, actually, we have received this request in the town, and we have tried to work with companies like Waze and obviously Google, and with limited success. And there's limited amount of work to sway the direction that's being used or being recommended to those apps. But this would be a much bigger scale, and I think definitely working with VTA, we will see if there's some collaborative ways that we can manage this better, but it's something to be determined. And as Chris mentioned, there's definitely some challenges with these large companies and trying to sway one way or the other, but we'll definitely be working with VTA to investigate this option.
Thank you. The next question, or it's comment and a question, says the meters will help the freeway facility, but will impact local streets, not just for cut-through users, but for those of us who live in Los Gatos. What measures are in place to monitor and or remediate the increased surface street congestion? Local street congestion is exactly what we're trying to avoid, and metering lights would worsen that.
So I'll go ahead and take that one first. So there are some design elements of the newer ramp metering designs that are really designed to kind of, greatly reduce, if not eliminate, the additional congestion that you might see on a local street in advance of those meters. So what we've got is basically what's called a Q loop, which is an inductive, magnetic inductive loop in the pavement that monitors when the Q from the meters actually starts to approach the local street. So kind of at the local street intersection end of the ramp. And so when that loop gets triggered, basically it will tell the meter's smart enough to say, okay, I need to now meter at a faster rate when that loop is occupied, meaning that there's a vehicle sitting over that particular loop. And then there are multiple metering rates that are built into those facilities. So when you start seeing those longer queues, you know, you can basically meter at the maximum practical rate. I would say that I think, you know, obviously when you have conditions when you're not concerned about cut through traffic, you know, there obviously is still some additional delay for the local residents that you have when you sit at the meter. But we think that the improved operations that you see on Route 17 and you know, your ability to then travel more quickly once you're actually on the freeway kind of outweigh those negative aspects of that incremental additional delay that you might be seeing.
Great, thanks, Chris. And now we will go to a hand. Ryan Rosenberg, I am unmuting you. And when you have that, you can begin to speak and ask your question.
Great. Can you guys hear me?
You can.
Okay. First of all, I used to live right on, I've lived in Los Gatos for years, and I used to live right on one side of this interchange. And I can tell you, I'm very thrilled that this project is in the books because, or is moving toward, because trying to walk downtown was impossible. I don't live there anymore, but I live in another part of town where I'm impacted by the cut through traffic. So either way, this is good. I do have a question though. On the environmental analysis, you talked about the visual impact part. And what I was wondering was whether or not you were planning on putting out, as part of that process, any images of how things might look from the highway, or, you know, from Highway 9 as well, so that we could get a feel for what, you know, what visual impact it might have on the town. I was very happy to hear that you're trying to mitigate tree removal, which I think is great, but also just in general, it'd be good to get a feel for how some of these things look. I want to add that the Highway 9 overpass project, the one, the other one you mentioned by Lark Avenue, I think it was by Lark, that one has had a bunch of visuals that the town published, and they even showed it downtown at the farmers market and stuff. So it was great to get a feel for how that was going to look. And I hope that we can get a feel for how this one's going to look too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, absolutely. We will have visual simulations of what the project will look like when it's constructed. Those will appear both in the visual report that backs up the environmental document, and those visual simulations will also be shown in the environmental document itself. It's a question of how many really visual sims we will provide, and usually they're typically chosen where there might be an impact, or that you really notice something. So sometimes the change, you replace one, you take away one existing interchange, you replace it with another one in the same location. There's maybe not so much of a change, but either way, yes, absolutely, we will provide visual sims.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you, Ryan. So our next, we're going to go Nikki, Martin, Miriam, and then Bill with a hand. So 3 in the Q&A and then 1 online. So Nikki asks, can you clarify your research in ensuring the widening the portion under discussion isn't just pushing the bottleneck further south on 17?
Well, one of the things with the aux lanes that do happen is, right, we're improving the operations in the local within the local project limits, but I would say that there is still going to be a bottleneck along 17 as you get to the south end of Los Gatos. So obviously dropping down to 2 lanes when you have vehicle demands that are more than what a 2-lane segment can accommodate, that will still be the same condition. But by allowing people to actually get to the State Route 9 exit ramp that want to exit in the town of Los Gatos and not go further to the south, you're basically allowing that volume to get to the town, and then also reduce the number of vehicles that you've got sitting in queue. So there are operational benefits locally, even though in reality there will still be downstream bottlenecks, if this project moves forward as it's kind of currently envisioned.
Thank you. And the next question goes to the town. It says, to Mr. Kim, there are 2 flock cameras on the Highway 9 overpass. Are those cameras part of this project?
I do not believe so. I'm not exactly clear on which cameras Martin's referring to, but not. I don't believe it's part of the current State Route 17 and project. It's not probably part of the Smart Signals project, but there are also cameras installed by other departments here in the town as well. So maybe related to that. Martin, I'm sure you could raise your hand if you wanted to elaborate on that question further, but I do not believe it's related to this project, no.
Okay, next we'll go to Miriam. She's got two. The first says, will removed trees be replaced with newly planted? Most of these trees are well established and serve well to clean the air.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. Yes, VTA actually has a very, very robust tree replacement policy. It's based on the size of the trees that are being impacted. It's based on the species, whether they're native or ornamental. It goes up as high as 3 to 1 to replace these trees. And I can tell you that on all projects, it ends up that we have to replace more trees than we took out. So let's say you have 100 trees removed, maybe 150 have to be replaced. So the next thing that happens is we typically can't fit all the replacement trees into the project area. There's just not enough room because we are mitigating at such a high level. So we tend to work with we can work with a city, but we mostly work with a nonprofit that finds locations both on public or private right-of-way property to be able to plant the trees within the city limits. So that's how that works. So hopefully, ultimately, in the end, you'll have more trees. And granted, they'll be small to start with, but that's how that works.
I just wanted to add to Ann, the numbers that she threw out were just total. Those aren't based on anything, right? It's not what we've identified.
Yeah, for example. Yeah, I said for example.
It was just an example, right? So
yeah.
What we have done is we've started surveying the trees to see kind of their location, their species. But we haven't necessarily, we're not far enough into the design to say, we think that this many trees would need to be removed. We've just started, we're gathering information, I guess, at this point. So it was just a completely hypothetical, just to clarify, right?
There are also, sorry to interrupt, there are also the town ordinances on trees. So we would make sure that that's being followed as well. Thank you.
And this next one is for you, Chris. It says, can you elaborate on how the sound wall could be replaced and constructed?
I think, as part of the environmental process that Ann described, we've got a couple things that we will be doing. So the first thing will be what's called a noise study report, where we identify sensitive receptors along the corridor. So a sensitive receptor would be a residence or a daycare or a school or all of those things would be considered sensitive receptors. Typically, like commercial properties are not considered a sensitive receptor, or like a big box store or something like that. So we identify those, and then we model the corridor to find out if the changes to the highway would increase the noise to any of those sensitive receptors. And once you've done that, then you can evaluate, are there new sound walls that might be required, for those sensitive receptors? And as part of that, you also evaluate what the existing sound walls, the benefit that they provide. And so if we knew that we were potentially impacting a sound wall with one of the widenings, which at this point we have not identified that because we're very early into the preliminary engineering process. But if it were, you would evaluate that wall to see if, potentially a taller wall or a longer wall might do a better job of reducing the noise for the adjacent sensitive receptors behind that existing wall. One of the things that we do try to do, and it's not always possible, but if you did have to remove and replace a wall, one of the things that you like to try to do is try to construct the new wall before you demolish the old one. It's not always feasible, but whenever possible, that's one of the things that we would try to accommodate as well.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we'll go to the hand. Bill Eller, I am going to unmute you right now, and you should be able to speak.
We're not hearing you, Bill, if you're speaking.
I have asked to
Got
unmute,
it.
but there we go.
Bill Ellers, I'm the Vice Chair of the Complete Streets Transportation Commission in Los Gatos. Welcome, thank you for the meeting. So the flyers say they implement complete streets consistent features. Can you please provide specific examples of the complete street treatment? This is a Highway 17 project. How does that impact complete streets?
Oh, you're muted, Chris.
Thank you, Deanna. The complete streets aspect of it would apply to Los Gatos Saratoga Road or State Route 9. So basically not the freeway, but the street that is crossing the freeway. And so, if you looked at that existing interchange with the full cloverleaf design and kind of the weaving that occurs for vehicles, in between those loop on or loop off and loop on ramps, it's just a really pedestrian and bicycle unfriendly design, right? Those type of interchanges were not designed with bicycles and pedestrians in mind. So the complete streets aspect of it is really related to, much wider sidewalks on Los Gatos Saratoga Road than what you have today. Sidewalks on both sides of the street rather than just one side. At the new signalized intersections, having ADA compliant push buttons and signal timing links, and like the countdown pedestrian heads for all of those facilities. Bike lanes, separated bike lanes within the Los Gatos Saratoga Road section, so that bicyclists don't necessarily have to share space with motor vehicles or with pedestrians. So all of those kind of elements are kind of a portion of that complete streets aspect. The other thing that we do consider for the local road crossings, like on a freeway lane, typically the standard design is to have a 12-foot lane. So when we're looking at the new overcrossing, possibly we can look at narrower lanes to maybe slow down traffic where we don't necessarily provide a full 12-foot width, because that is, once again, more in keeping with the complete street design elements that you're looking for. There's probably other stuff I'm forgetting, Bill, but those are the ones that kind of come to the top of my mind.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Can I also ask, are the Los Gatos Street Trails very close to the highway? And so if you're going to widen the freeway, you're going to have the freeway closer to the creek trail. Do you consider people on the creek trail to be sensitive receptors?
Typically, it's the property use, so not a passerby. But the trail itself, like a park, let's say. So let's take the Vasona Lake County Park. So that would qualify as a sensitive receptor.
Okay, so the bike path
Really
is
about
on
the land use.
Okay, as the creek trail is on the edge of Vasona between the highway and the park. So it sounds like the creek trail is a sensitive receptor.
I can't say that for certain. I'd have to look into what the status of that particular trail is, what it is, what the designation is. And we haven't necessarily determined that, but that is something that we would certainly consider, right?
Okay.
It wouldn't qualify as a sensitive receptor in the terms of analyzing whether or not a sound wall is required. It is a stationary facility, stationary building, and the users of those structures that are sensitive receptors. The pedestrians and the bicyclists are moving along on the trail. The people who are in a stationary structure are there, right? The noise affects them 24/7.
Okay, well, I just heard the comment that Vasona Park would be a sensitive receptor.
It is.
Okay, the creek trail is on the edge of Vasona between the freeway and, so I don't understand why you designate the Vasona Park as a sensitive receptor and not the creek trail.
Well, there are some land uses that the land use itself, it can be without, so basically like a cemetery. believe it or not, a cemetery is considered a sensitive receptor, but it's not a building, right?
Great.
But I'm not sure about the trail, right? Because it's not technically a park. It's not a cemetery. It's not a school. All of those things could be, in the school, there's a building associated with it, right? So that might be a little bit different.
All
But there are a few specific land uses that are considered sensitive receptors. Trails are typically not one of those, but I'd want to see how the underlying land of the trail itself is defined, I think.
Okay, I'd like to remind you that on some weekends, we get 1,000 people using the creek trail. So it's just like people using the highway, we have 1,000 people using the creek trail right next to the freeway. So I would strongly encourage you to treat the creek trail as a sensitive receptor. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Bill,
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And maybe just, can you think of any other ones other than like cemeteries and parks? Because I know those are the only two that I can really think of.
I think Jean wants to say something too, so
Yeah,
I can take turns.
I just want to make a
Go ahead,
point.
Jean. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to make a point that if we do put sound walls there, that could be removal of trees involved because it's right along that right-of-way line. So that's something you also need to consider. But we will look into that and see if that's something that is needed to be impacted.
And did you want to say anything else, or should I move on to the next question?
Oh, sorry. No.
Okay.
I have nothing else to say. Sorry.
Okay, so our next questions, they were thinking the same thing, so we're going to answer these together.
Okay.
So Mary asks, will any work need to be done to the Blossom Hill Bridge crossing Highway 17? And Jeff says, since the project extends through Blossom Hill Road, including the Blossom Hill Road Bridge over SR 17, can the project include fixing the bridge height to standard height? The truck hit the bottom of the low bridge several years ago.
Okay, just checking to make sure my microphone's still on. So it's not currently within the scope of the project to replace the Blossom Hill Road overcrossing. Obviously with the town's project to construct a separate pedestrian overcrossing at that location, it's not one of the kind of the critical elements to accomplish what we said was the purpose of the project, right? So if we looked at it from improving bicycle pedestrian facilities, it really doesn't meet that particular purpose. It's not going to reduce cut-through traffic in the town. I'm spacing without actually having the purpose in front of me. Improve traffic operations on State Route 17. It's not going to do that. And there's one other bullet. I think what the other one was. Maybe somebody can help me. Let's see.
At the complete streets issue.
It is. Yeah, the improve active transportation. I guess I did that, right? So I guess there's two of them. One is improve mainline traffic operations, reduce cut through traffic, improve State Route 17, State Route 9 interchange operations. So the interchange operations, we've got that as a separate purpose of the project. So we're basically replacing the Blossom Hill Road overcrossing would not, it does not fall into any of those categories, I guess.
Okay. Next comes from Susan. Asked, how will the redesigned ramps affect communities that border Route 17, for example, Creekside Village? If there is an expansion planned or trees to be removed, how will you protect these communities?
For the most part, we're expecting all of these improvements to be within the existing Caltrans right-of-way. So we don't envision a lot of permanent impacts. I guess the one thing that, whenever you're undertaking a construction project, that's you're going to take multiple years to build. We're talking about a couple years a duration to construct these improvements. There are short-term construction impacts associated with that. Obviously, you've got construction traffic. You've got, some of those inconveniences associated with being near a construction site. So I think those would probably be the biggest impacts. But as far as permanent impacts, I don't see, certainly for Creekside Village, I think that is the community that's immediately west of Los Gatos Creek. Is that right, Ujai? Right, off of Los Gatos Saratoga Road. I don't see any property impacts, at least for those homes.
Thank you. Next question from Jeff says, I'm very much in favor of the changes proposed. However, it may only move the backup on SR 17 to a slightly southward direction. Can additional lanes be added to SR 17 south of SR 9?
Certainly beyond the scope of this project, and probably challenging for a number of reasons. Just because the desire is to try to get people out of their automobile as much as possible, and not necessarily discourage or to try to encourage the use of transit. And so any significant widening south towards Santa Cruz is probably the opposite of those larger goals. You have to be concerned about trying to widen yourself out of the congestion problems that we have. So as part of this project, it's certainly beyond the scope of this effort.
Thank you. And next question comes from Eric, who asks, will the existing sound wall be moved near the Lark exit?
At this point, we have not. We are not planning on moving that, but I have to preface that with the fact that we're very early on in the preliminary engineering. We're still collecting data. We have not completed the traffic operations analysis. So all of those things will determine kind of with more granularity what the final design will look like. At this point, we've got a concept, and we still need to go through all the steps that are required to say this is going to achieve the purpose of the project. We're going to meet the purpose of the project, and then two, what would the impacts of all of those improvements be? So at this point, no, but I have to say that it's really too early to say for certain on some of these kind of very fine questions as far as the design.
Thank you. The next question is going to go from Tashu, and it says, will there be any late or overnight construction going on when the project starts? And if so, will we be notified? Any way to control the noise? So part of that is for me. Like, how about you start it?
Okay, so yes, there will be night work. Typically, when you're working on the freeway main line and you potentially would have to close a lane, it's really, the amount of delay that you would be subjecting motorists to just say have one lane on each direction of 17 during the day really kind of makes that infeasible. So there will be night work, but I will say there are very strict restrictions on the magnitude of noise that a contractor can generate at night and the equipment that can be used when you're working adjacent to the freeway. So one of the studies that Ann had talked about was a noise study report. And so the noise study report will not only identify the additional vehicular noise that potentially could be generated by the project, right? By having by the changes to State Route 17, but also addresses the construction noise during construction. And so it requires that all of the engines and generators, they have certain requirements from an air quality emission standpoint, but then also from a noise emission standpoint. And those are measures that are implemented as part of the project. It gets baked into the project special provisions, which are the requirements that the contractor has to adhere to.
And I'll just add, as for being notified, that is part of my job in community outreach. So yes, you would be. Anytime there are lane closures, ramp closures, construction within, I want to say 600 feet, that's my job to make sure that people are notified. So yes, that would be part of the project. The next question comes from Joe. It says, hello, I live at the Alberto Way Townhome Development and walk on Highway 9 past all 417 interchanges every day, including today, to get to town. Both of the interchanges where traffic comes either north or southbound 17 onto Highway 9 are very dangerous for pedestrians. In particular, the incoming traffic from southbound 17 to Highway 9, closest to University Ave, must be the most dangerous pedestrian crossing in Los Gatos. The vegetation on the Caltrans right-of-way and the speeding cars who have no idea that there is a pedestrian crosswalk as they speed to enter the town make this very dangerous. Must we wait until 2028 to do interim fixes on this? Cut vegetation back, put a big sign to cars that they are about to cross a pedestrian crosswalk. Surely something can be done now. It says that would be on Caltrans right-of-way, so it would require coordination with the town and Caltrans. So I don't know if the town wants to address that.
Is my microphone still on? It is.
Yeah, I
right?
think
You
it's
are
probably
on.
more Chris, actually.
So what
Yeah.
I would say is, I think we can at least put you in touch with the right folks. Obviously, we're the project development team for this particular project, but I know there are contacts that the department that Caltrans has for maintenance activities and required maintenance, which it kind of sounds like this falls into that category. And I think maybe I can work with Deanna to get you those contacts on who you would need to speak to about, having the vegetation trimmed back. But I will say that, we also see the need. I mean, that's obviously one of our four primary purposes of this project, is to improve bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Just because, like I said, the obsolete interchange design and the crosswalk configurations and the weaving within this segment are just not desirable for active transportation modes. So we agree with the need, and I think we can at least put you in touch with the folks that are responsible for the vegetation trimming.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah,
this is
and-
Gene.
Yeah.
This is Gene. We can get in touch with Caltrans and alert them to this issue.
Sure.
I think we have a contacts in the maintenance, and we'll bring it up as a concern from the Los Gatos community.
Okay. Thanks, Gene.
Yeah, and also, sorry, I just must have tuned out in the last part of the question here, and the town would also get involved and promote any kind of interim fixes needed for here if there's any kind of hazardous situation. It is a bit of a hairy interchange there, so we do realize improvements are needed, and that would be a key improvement as part of this project. For interim wise, I'll take note of this question as well and try to reach out to Caltrans to see if there's anything that could be done interim wise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Joe. Just to give an update, I'm going to take 3 more questions from the chat, and then we'll go back to Bill with the hand. So I just want you to know I'm not ignoring you, just trying to go in the order. So next comes from Martin. He says, we live close to the existing cloverleaf. Are the environmental impacts of cars queuing at the metering lights being addressed?
Sorry, can you repeat that one, Deanna? Sorry.
Sure. It says, we live close to the existing cloverleaf. Are the environmental impacts of cars queuing at the metering lights, meaning the increased exhaust from these cars that are in line, being addressed?
So, Chris, you want me to?
You can start if you want. Go for
Sure.
it.
So, the air quality, similar to the noise, the air quality looks at both long-term, the operation of the project once it's built, the air quality effects, and it also looks at during construction effects. It tends to look at the area as a whole, the project area as a whole, not specifically down to a ramp with a metering light. So I don't, I'm not quite sure how to answer this question without, the analysis being done. I mean, the analysis does take all this into account, but I don't really have a better answer for you than that, because is there going to be an environmental impact because of the cars queuing at a metering light based on related to air quality? That's something for the analysis to determine, but it doesn't get that down to that quite detail of an analysis, a specific ramp next to where you live.
I think the other thing that you'll find is that really the numbers that are have the greatest impact on emissions are really the mainline volumes rather than the ramp volumes, because it's a much higher volume. And so what they do as part of the analysis is they figure, for the before project and after project, they come up with speeds of vehicles. And obviously if the main line is in stop and go traffic, that's a lot of vehicles idling when that is occurring. So it's a lot of vehicles going really slow. And with the metering, the idea is that if you can, improve those operations so that for a shorter percentage of the day, or when you do have congesting conditions, it's not as congested. So you don't have as many, basically a lower density of vehicles on State Route 17 itself. That trade-off will far outweigh whatever vehicles that you have sitting at the metering lights, just because you can't accumulate enough vehicles at the metering lights relative to the number of vehicles that could be in congestion on the main line. So I think that's another, it's a slightly different way to look at it. But the idea is if you can improve the mainline operations, you will be, you potentially have the ability to reduce the emissions.
Thank you, Chris. I do a quick time check. It's 6:57. I think we have 8 more questions, so we'll take all of those. And thank you for staying with us a little bit later. So the question from Shirley says, I assume there will be resurfacing of SR 17. Will that be a noise reducing surface?
That's a good question. I don't know that we've arrived at that conclusion yet, because there actually has been a pretty recent rehab of the pavement on State Route 17. So the pavement's not necessarily in poor condition, but I would also say it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't be overlaying it. I would say that we haven't necessarily arrived at that determination yet. I would say it's extremely, extremely likely that the existing flexible pavement would be, you would match the existing surfacing, that you wouldn't change the surfacing type. And typically we find that the flexible pavements generate quite a bit less noise with a flexible surface versus a rigid concrete pavement, Portland cement concrete pavement. Within that, there are some other things that you can even further do to reduce noise, like a rubberized hot mix asphalt is slightly quieter than just a hot mix asphalt. The rubberized uses ground up tires in the aggregate to make it even a little bit quieter and more environmentally friendly, because of, you don't have to put those tires in a landfill. So there are some things that will be looked at over the course of the design, but I can't say for certain at this point what that precise surfacing will look like. But I would say it's extremely likely that it will be something similar to what's out there today.
Thank you. This next one is from Ryan. It's more of a comment than a question, but I'm just going to make sure I share it publicly. It says, I walk and occasionally bike the Los Gatos Creek Trail all the time on this stretch. While sound is an issue, to me, the biggest issue is visual. When you can't see the highway, then it feels remote. In those parts where you can see the highway, it reminds you it is there. So I think blocking the view is key. If that can be done with greenery versus a sound wall, I think that is better. But if it can't be done with greenery, then just having the trail right next to an open highway is bad. Better to at least have a sound wall. So thank you, Ryan, for that. And now I'll go back to Bill. So I'm going to unmute you. Can you speak?
Thank you, Bill Ellers again. So a few people have made the comment that they think that the backup will just move further north. I think that's pretty much a given. I don't think anybody would actually fight that much. So the proposal will spend $120 million to relieve congestion for how many minutes of the year? Is there a number for that? So of course, you're talking about improving the main line operation. Well, the main line is only clogged up for a short amount of time throughout the year, particularly in the summer. So the main line should be improved for, you see what I'm getting at, right?
I do. You're kind of looking at like a cost benefit type
Yes, I am.
analysis, right? And those are applicable questions to be asking. I would say at this point, I can't answer any of those questions because we haven't actually completed the operational analysis to see the extent of the improvements that we will be achieving. But I would also kind of caution that line of thinking just a little bit, because how do you put a price on the improved bicycle and pedestrian safety along State Route 9 or along Los Gatos Saratoga Road? Or how do you put a price on, the better connectivity or for the high school students that might be going to Los Gatos High School on that segment of the local road? So I think it is a good question to be asking, and we will be doing some work with that regards, and it's just too early for me to answer. But there are some things that are, you've got to think about it from not just a dollars and cents standpoint, if you would.
I understand that. Thank you for that comment. One last comment. So Complete Streets is part of the scoping of this project. Well, if you want to do Complete Streets, I would suggest that Caltrans chip in a few dollars to the bicycle pedestrian overcrossing on Blossom Hill the town is going to construct. So that would be a huge benefit to the town for Complete Streets. And it would probably see more traffic than Highway 9 Complete Streets facility, or at least on par with that. Thank you.
Deanna, you're muted. Sorry.
I knew that was going to happen. I made it almost to the end.
I did it once. Now you've done it once. We'll see who wins by the end of the presentation.
Well, I said thank you to Bill for that comment. And now we're going back to Jennifer, who had the earlier comment about the navigation apps. So it says, follow up to my navigation app question. I'm actually a traffic engineer with the city of San Jose, and I know this coordination with the apps has been completed successfully in other jurisdictions, including for some 280 cut through traffic in Los Altos Hills. So it's definitely worth pursuing, and I urge you to look into this as an interim solution. It's a matter of getting hold of the right people with those apps and being tenacious. And then it says, also recommend you consider RRFBs with advanced RRFBs for those uncontrolled crosswalks at the off-ramps as another good interim solution until the interchange is reconstructed. So there's that comment, and maybe you can explain what RRFBs are to those of us who are not traffic engineers.
Oh, it's like rapid rectangular flashing beacon. I'm not quite getting that right. Maybe she can help in the chat, but it's the flashing beacons at the crosswalks when you press like a pedestrian push button within the signs. They have some additional beacons. Oh, my traffic engineer just messaged me that that's correct. Rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So I did get it right. Thank you. So that's what those are. And I think there are some restrictions on that use. I'm not sure what the current Caltrans thinking on those within the state right of way is, which is a little bit of a sticking point that we have. Not really a sticking point, but there's a different set of standards that Caltrans will apply to a facility than what the town would apply to the facility. But I'm aware of those, and I think it does merit assessment. I would agree with that.
Thank you. And it looks like our last question comes from Joe. It says, are you looking at the sound wall improvements for residential dwellings adjacent to the freeway at the 17-9 interchange?
We haven't identified which sensitive receptors we're going to study, but I would think it's extremely likely that those would be included as sensitive receptors. I would be surprised if they're not.
Great, thank you. So I think that wraps us up at 7:05. As a reminder, scoping comments may be sent by either mail or postal mail. There's the email address and the postal mail address right there. You have until Monday, June 6th to submit your written comments. And this information is also included in the materials that were sent out and posted on our website. So it's very available if you need to look it up. It'll be there. And if we could just go to the last slide. My contact information is included here. We also have the address to the project webpage. So this page is where the recording of this meeting will be posted. If you want to review it again, if you want to share it with neighbors or colleagues who couldn't be here tonight, that's where it will be. Again, give us until Monday morning, just to make sure that we've got time to download that and upload it correctly. And that's it. So thank you for coming tonight and have a good night.
Thank you all.